So I'm recording this early into October, and there's that autumn sort of nip in the air. The leaves are starting to turn brown and fall from the trees, which is an absolute nuisance for us because we live on a kind of slope. And there's a tree at the top of our drive, just out on the road, which overhangs slightly, and that means my battle for the next few months is to stop the leaves from overtaking the drive. But also there's the great beauty of it as well. There's conkers on the ground and all that kind of thing. I'm carrying one in my pocket for some reason at the moment. Yeah. There you go. You can see that. There's my one conker. I'm not going to start conker fights with it. And we're approaching things like bonfire night. And people will be counting down to Christmas, won't they? There's lots about this season that are fantastic. There are things that come in terms of challenges for Christians and Christian families. And so I wanted to talk in this video a bit about what do we do with the 31st of October. And obviously I'm talking about Halloween. Now, there have been numerous approaches by Christians about how they deal with it. And I thought I'd just run through a few of them just to get us thinking. So one approach, particularly amongst Protestants and Reformed and Lutheran people, is to say we're going to duck Halloween altogether, and we are going to just focus on something else that coincidentally lands on that day. So the 31st of October, if you didn't know this is something exciting, marks the anniversary of when Martin Luther started his protest, nailing that protest document to the church door, which is a way of really saying, I want to debate this stuff. It's the equivalent of putting a post up on Facebook back in his day. It was an invitation to say, come back at me. Let's debate this. Let's argue this out. And of course, what Luther discovered is that people don't tend to like, particularly those that have power, don't really like open debate. And they may say, yeah, you've got the freedom to debate it, but they don't really want you doing that. And those people that tend to do that thing tend to meet obstacles, which Luther did. So really, the 31st of October is kind of the birthday, the anniversary of the Reformation starting. And what that Reformation was about, the Protestant Reformation, was, even though it wasn't discovered, it starts with Luther protesting some injustices and some unethical stuff that's going on in the church. This thing called indulgences, which was about the Pope raising money for a building project in Rome by selling these things called indulgences, that were basically a way of getting your loved ones out of purgatory early. Well, that's where it started. But for Luther, there was this growing understanding that what the church had been failing to do was to teach the Bible correctly in order to justify its own corruption. But the result of that was that some of the big and wonderful truths of the gospel had been distorted, covered up, abused, lost. And specifically, justification by faith alone. That we are not saved by our works and what we do, but rather it is God's grace to us. And that's at the heart of the Reformation. And with it comes a recognition that God is sovereign, not to be influenced or manipulated, and that we can rely and depend on his word, the Bible, scripture. And those of us that are evangelicals today owe our heritage back to that. And so there is something to celebrate there, I think. And that's what some people have done. I remember when I was at theological college, the people made a big thing of that. Easy to do that in a kind of a closed sort of Christian community like a theological college, isn't it? Or a missionary community. But actually there's a problem with attempting to do that, in the idea that we might have Reformation Day parties and that kind of thing for our kids and the friends of our kids is unlikely to get traction in the wider community. You are basically really swimming against the tide with that one. And unless you have taken a view that you want to retreat off from society, and I know some people are doing, and they are moving towards that sort of community type thing. They develop their own types of communities, and their children go to Christian schools and Christian colleges and universities eventually, and that kind of thing, and get jobs with Christian organisations and Christian businesses and that kind of thing. But that's not where most of us are, and rightly so. So option number one, replace it with something preferable. Option number two is just ignore it completely, as best as you can. And for some people that will be just the simplest thing to do. Do you know what? I think for a lot of people, a lot of older people, the safest and wisest thing to do is to stick one of those little stickers on your door that says "No trick-or-treaters here." That's just wise and safe. And actually, what we're increasingly seeing, I think, even 20 years ago, even 15 years ago, you might have expected people to knock on your door trick-or-treating, and to assume that people were opting into that. In, I'd say, probably the last sort of 10 years, it became more the case that you had to signal, usually with something like a pumpkin or something outside, that you were taking part, that there were treats available at your house, and so that there was not taking the kind of the sort of the mild peril of whether there's going to be a trick. So one option is just to ignore it completely, and for some people that will be the right thing to do. A third option is just to embrace it, and what that would look like is just to say, I'm in for the whole kind of shebang, the whole horror show, if you like. We are going to go trick-or-treating as a family. We are going to dress up. We are not just going to have treats ready at the house as a sort of a defence mechanism, if you like, maybe with some handy tracks to give out as well. We are going to embrace it fully. So if we are giving out treats, we're going to participate. We're going to decorate the house. That's more of an American tradition, isn't it? But it happens a bit over here as well. And we're going to embrace the scariness of it, if you like. There are some Christians out there that would argue that actually that's not a bad thing to do, that there is a sense in which that subverts the terrors of evil by mocking them, and fulfills our true hopes and dreams in terms of saying, but actually Christ is the one who has the power over evil, and makes this whole thing not scary. So there's an option. Here's another option. And that's that we engage with it. We try to look at a bit more at what is behind it, and we engage with what might be some of the good things that are actually there at the heart of what, after all, was a Christian festival. So what's the history behind it? Well, first of all, there were festivals, feasts, events happening around the known world when Christianity came, and that's probably why the date was chosen to mark something seen as more Christian. What effectively the early Christian missionaries and the church were doing was effectively subverting what was already there, and so the origins are really, as I sort of indicated at the start, we're moving into the winter months. It's getting colder, it's getting darker, the leaves are falling off the trees, things seem to be dying. And so you had events, feasts, festivals that involved really sort of lighting fires and having lights and things, to say that there was a hope that the darkness wouldn't triumph, that death wouldn't triumph. And that still is more overt in some cultures, isn't it, that haven't come into contact with Christianity and Christendom in quite the same way. So you will still have Diwali, the Festival of Lights. And other religions will have their festivals and their focus on lighting lights and lighting things up to give warmth and light and a sense of life. But also there's that sense of death. I would suggest as well that there's also a sense of, in an older world, that we are all connected together, so there would be a sense of that those gone before us still are connected to us. And so when we celebrate these big things, there's no surprise if the dead turn up. By the way, that is not a Christian tradition at all, but that's perhaps another video to talk about what happens when we die. But with that will also become the fear that we might not want everything that is dead or other every spirit to turn up. Some of them might not be nice. So how do we ward them off? How do we scare them off? And one of the things you see in cultures is that you do that by creating grotesque images, that you mock them, that you scare them off with something even scarier, that kind of thing. And so those are all the pagan kind of foundations there. And like I said, in come Christians, and they don't want people to be celebrating that kind of thing anymore. So they offer them something else, but something connected to celebrate instead. And so you get and there's two variants, All Saints Day and All Souls Day, and I can never remember which is which, but both, one is on the 1st of November, the other on the 2nd, but there's a sense there of we are marking this time of year, and in a world that seems to be going through its own death experience, we are expressing hope that death leads to resurrection, and that has implications for our loved ones who have died and gone before us. And that's kind of where you're getting to with the Christian feast. That's very broad brush. But of course, what happens is that you still get the intermingling of the old with the new, and we see that frequently. I think that is one of the problems that you have with Catholicism. And then you get a big dose of commercialism, American commercialism, and you get the modern phenomenon of trick-or-treating and that sort of Halloween and that kind of thing. And then alongside that, you've got the even darker side of the horror film industry, Friday the 13th and Halloween films and all that kind of thing. And a ton of superstition gets awakened as well. And that's where I think that there are opportunities to say, actually, it might be right, and where some people go and say that we engage with this, but we also want to step back a bit. There's a little bit more of stepping back. They say that we are going to provide an opportunity for people to celebrate light and life. And we're going to give them reasons in that joyful celebration not to fear death and dying and evil. And we're going to do that by bringing people back to the gospel. So that's another approach. And I would suggest that to some extent that's what we try to do when we have these things called light parties. And I think that there is a positive and healthy thing there. But here's my proviso. We can do that in a kind of thin, kind of lame way, can't we? So it becomes non-scary fancy dress and a gospel talk with a pumpkin light, or maybe not even that, we just dole out some sweets and that kind of thing, and hope that people will sort of just pick something up from it and get them away from the nastiest stuff. What I would be saying is think about how you really thicken up and deepen your approach to Halloween and to light and showing light parties and that kind of thing, and do that by knowing and understanding what it's all about, to know the roots of it all better, get a better understanding of what are the hopes and dreams and fears that are being reflected in this, and know the gospel better, and bring the thickness of the gospel to bear. So that means when you share the gospel in that context, you are not just saying, here's a pumpkin, being out, stick a light in us, that reminds us about how Jesus comes and he's lighting our life. Good gospel stuff. But you actually address the reason why we want light is that there is something scary about the dark and what comes with it. All these horrible images and horrible entities and that kind of thing. And so Jesus is the one who came, not just bringing light, not just bringing forgiveness, but bringing victory over the powers of evil. That's really where we want to be landing in our light party or Halloween type celebrations. Well, those are my thoughts. And in this short video, you might pick up that I probably have a preference there. I'm not saying that there are particularly right or wrong ways. I'm more cautious about the sort of the more sort of embrace it kind of thing. I think that comes with greater risks. But I'd love to hear from you. What are your ideas? How do you approach it? What is required in your context? Thanks for watching in.